Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 18th webinar of the Tata Tiscon eDiscovery series. It's a great pleasure to have all of you all here. Yes, and my name is Myhhili Kowshik Shetty, and this is I'd like to thank Tata Tiscon for this opportunity to be able to connect professionals and students and dealers and people connected with the AEC industry together on a platform that's digital. So no matter where we are across India, this is an opportunity to connect and share ideas, share concerns, and really celebrate the fact that we are growing India, and this is the greatest opportunity that we have. So thank you very much for everyone being here. Welcome to all the students, the dealers, everybody. And I'd like to introduce myself. I'm an architect by profession, graduated 25 years ago from Academy of Architecture. I'm Mumbai based. I've worn many hats. I am a visiting professor of design at Academy of Architecture and IES College Bandra. I've been a writer. I've been associated with different magazines writing architecture. But most of all, I'm passionate about people. I don't know if you all can see this, but really, this is what keeps me going. And I keep this in my purse, actually, to remind me that people matter. So when I got this opportunity to have this webinar, I thought, what a great opportunity to start up and have a connection where we discover the people that we design for and make life worth for them. So welcome, and let's begin. The topic for today is the National Building Code for individual homes. And is it not working? I can't seem to. Okay, so I'd just like to give you a couple of rules. I've got it. Couple of rules. I think all the attendees are muted. Please do send in your questions online, and we will collate them and answer them and discuss them at the end of this thing. So the way it will be structured is so I will be talking for approximately 45 minutes, 45 to 50 minutes, after which we can discuss the questions or concerns or anything that you all would like to discuss. And at the end of it, there is a webinar survey. So would welcome all your feedback on the webinar. So once we're through with these, let's get started. So the topic for today is National Building Code for individual homes. So there are three parts of this presentation, the way I'm structured it. The first part is the National Building Code, which for a lot of the audience today, you all will be familiar with. If you're a civil engineer, you're a contractor, you're a regulatory body, you're an architect, you're a student, most of us will have some information about this, and I'd just like to take this further. The next part will be on the individual home builder, whom I'd like to call the IHB, and why we would be talking about them. And the third part will be designing for safety, which is what I like to call the NBC for IHB. So without further ado, maybe let's get started. So building codes. So if we have to look back, what are building codes? So building codes, very briefly put, have always been historically important to civilization. From even far back as the 1700 BCs, there have been records of codes of how buildings should be, how planning should be done. They also bring order to built environment. So as long as people have been civilized and trying to live together, there's been a sense of order, and codes have helped bring this order in. And these are kind of set of rules that specify minimum standards, which I think is a standard policy for all of guiding all codes forever. And the codes that we talk about here in India, the National Building Code, are recommendatory, not mandatory, which means it is recommended that we follow them, but it is not that it's not has to be followed. It is we recommend and you should follow, but you choose. And the intent really at the end of it all is to ensure welfare and safety of people during and after construction. And the word safety really calls me, and I'd like to kind of base the entire webinar on aspects of safety. Okay, and I'm sorry, my voice a little, I'm suffering from a cold. So building codes from across the world. So I'd like to go back in history. Like I said, historically, they've been important. So the first known code actually is the Code of Hammurabi from 1772 BC, which is actually carved on a stone stele, which tells us about how the planning was in Mesopotamia, which is one of the first recorded civilizations which was documented. So it's been around since that time. The other record is from the Bible, actually, 7th century BC, the Code of Deuteronomy, which has a written record of how places should be planned. Post that, we move into the Spanish civilization. Since they had colonized across the world, they wanted to tie up and have regulations that were common across their colonies. So they had something called the Law of the Indies, which was also published. Post that, I'd like you to look at 1666 AD, which was a rebuilding of the London Act, which was after the Great Fire of London, where they had to reconstruct a great part of London, and they decided to have rules that kind of built it together. So that was it. And moving on to modern times, the International Building Code, which was formulated in the US and which is now kind of universally accepted, and which a lot of countries have now based their codes on. And the latest version is 2018, and they have a lot of kind of fallouts from there. They have illustrated codes which we haven't gotten to, and we have our own National Building Code of India, which was the first edition was in 1970, and the latest edition has been in 2016. It's a 2-volume set, as I'm sure most of us will know, and it's what we base most of our decisions on and kind of like regulatory information on as we build. So moving on, quick facts about the National Building Code of India. It's 2 volumes. The latest edition, like we just discussed, is 2016. The number of pages, it's voluminous. It's 1224 pages for the first volume and 1024 pages for the second volume. So it's not an easy read. But adjectives that come to mind when we discuss the National Building Code are that it's comprehensive, that's very valuable resource for most people who are planning anything to do with construction or materials. It's also very confusing for somebody who's looking at it for the first time because it's very technical. So that's one of the drawbacks. It's also very handy. If you know how to sort and look through it, you have all your answers up there. It's a little heavy to carry around and walk around, so it is voluminous. It is always very useful, and it's a must-have for most professionals in the building industry for sure. And unfortunately, the way we've written it, it's also very boring. So while that's where it's at, it's a composite of everything that there is. But there are some quick facts that I'd like us to run over. It's built, there are 5 basic sections. So there's a group 1, which is building planning and related aspects. Group 2, which is structural design and related aspects, which is something that most of us would be most related to or most familiar with. Then there is a group 3, which is construction and facility management, which is also something to do with building management and project management and construction. And then there is group 4, which is building services and related aspects, which is to do with the other services that go with building. And group 5, which is the plumbing services and solid waste management. So these are the broad structures in which the code has been designed. And there are also things like sustainability, hazard management, planning, regulations, all of which come into this picture, and it keeps getting modified and updated as we go along. So for actually engineers, the most referred sections that we have are section 6, which is structural design, which is read in conjunction with something that I have come to discover rather lately and quite like, which is the Vulnerability Atlas of India, the 2019 version. There's also section 7, which is the construction management and practices for safety for project managers, consultants, etc. There is the building materials section, which is also important. And then there is section on sustainability, which is a very important fact, knowing where we stand right now at the cusp of, this rampant development that we have, and knowing the way the world is so fragile, and where there is greenhouse gases and fires and floods. So sustainability and making the right choices is also a very important aspect to look at, and this has also been marked out in the code. So like I was talking about the vulnerability atlas, so these are references, and what struck me when I was reading this was exactly what has been an overriding factor for me, which says that it's well known that the collapse and damage that is caused to buildings during natural disasters is the largest cause of loss of life. And so safety of our buildings and our built environment is what is going to provide safety for the people. And that's what is critical. And I think as professionals in the building industry, that's what we can stand and be responsible for, and something that I feel very passionately about. So this is something that I've, well, I knew that we are disaster prone, but these are the facts about India, that India is one of the most disaster prone countries in the world. We have a major disaster which occurs every 2 to 3 years. Now, while this is what the Vulnerability Atlas says, I'm not so sure whether it's 2 to 3 years, because we've been having severe floods and landslides and earthquakes almost every year. So it may not be 2 to 3 years, it may actually be every year now. And up to 5 crore people are affected annually, which for a country as large as ours may not seem a lot. But if that really affected somebody close to you, it would mean everything. Then 5 crore or one, it would matter greatly. And 10 lakh houses are damaged annually. Now, 10 lakh houses may be a small number, but houses represent an investment of a lifetime for a lot of people. And for them to recover from the loss or the damage to that can be beyond years, not just a single year, but may take years, may take a lifetime. So really, that's what we hold in balance for the people that we design for. That when we design for lifetimes and for a large part of their lifetime. So these numbers are not just small numbers, they really matter so much more than just the numbers themselves. So just to look at the facts, over 65% of land in India is vulnerable to earthquakes. So if you look at the map, we'll see that India has been upgraded in the seismic studies. So we have section 5, we have zone 5, 4 and 3, which is 65% of India. So everything that we design for should ideally be looking at earthquake resistant planning and what it entails. Similarly, we have 40 million hectares vulnerable to floods, and that is only taking into account the river plains, the river beds, but it hasn't taken into account the fact that we've had floods in states like Kerala, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka, Uttarakhand, even this year. So these states were not even in the flood zones, and we've suffered floods and untold damage to all these areas. So really, we have a lot to take care of. Similarly, we have 8,000 kilometers of coastline prone to cyclones, which are multi-hazard situations where there is high wind loads, there is high rain, there is water. So there is multi-level damage, which is something that we have to counter and take care of. And while as a country we have kind of upped our level of being cyclone ready, we still do get a lot of damage to life and to property. And that's the opportunity for us designers and engineers to make sure that we are providing for that. So given that, that's what's available for us. And these are some of the codes I think I'd like to run over, where we have the earthquake resistant construction code. I'm sure most engineers looking at this code would already know about it, so not going to waste time about it. So we have seismic loads in section 5. Then we have the wind hazard resistant construction. So, and it's very beautifully detailed out. So the kind of roofs and the damage that it can cause, because I'm sure a lot of us will know that sometimes a wind upthrust can just lift roofs, and that roof falling elsewhere can cause tremendous damage. So wind loads are important. While one might think that wind doesn't, it's not a big deal, it is quite important. And then there are, cyclone and multi-hazard resistant construction areas. So there's the NBC actually covers pretty much everything that one needs to cover if we can look at it, and if we can just look carefully enough at it and implement it. So that's really the invitation today, to look at that. So the current scope for civil engineers and structural consultants is basically that the code requires that there should be a certification for safety that is given by a structural engineer. And that's pretty much where most structural engineers jobs end. Like, you're supposed to give a design and certify it that it is it can withstand earthquakes, it can whatever it has to withstand, and it will stand for the commensurate number of years, and that's where it ends. And my invitation really is to look at the potential scope for civil engineers and structural consultants, which is being an influencer for safety, not just for natural hazards, but also for man-made hazards. Because from the experience that I've seen, the architects may be less involved with home builders than engineers are. So the engineers really have a great role to play. And the invitation is for you all to take that on and be an influencer. Influence people to make the right choices. So that's where I'd like to kind of leave this thing. And the question is, the NBC really refers to a much wider range of like larger buildings, larger concerns like industrial or commercial. So really for the individual homes, what percentage of the NBC is involved? It could be as small as 5%, it could be 15%. I haven't really done a tabulation. I did try and I gave it up, but it could be anywhere between 5 to 40%. But whatever the percentage is, each life is invaluable, and the effort must be worth putting it, like really putting our effort into it, all our education, whatever we have learned and whatever we can provide. So let's just do that. Let's have it count. Let's have our education count. Let's have our experience count. So the sections that of the NBC that the engineer may necessarily not see, but as an influencer you might want to see, is in the DC rules. Like, people will buy a plot which is very close to a high tension line, and they'll say, oh, I got it cheap. But if you as an engineer have noticed that, just to bring it to their attention, so like, okay, this is this is a hazard, or we have to plan for that, would be a great help to the home builder if they did get a chance to know. Or even planting of trees, or making sure that trees or large plantations are far away from the house, such that in the case of a cyclone or something, your house is not damaged by the tree falling, or the roots don't damage the foundation. So really looking at that. And the other thing is recharge wells, because knowing that a water crisis, like a drinking water crisis, could be looming close by, it's important that we advise people on recharging the groundwater rather than using it indiscriminately. So small things, these are really small gestures, small things that one could look at, like expanding one's scope beyond what one is used to and doing business as usual. So really the invitation is to look at these things. The other is, as life expectancy goes up, we have to look at how older people will negotiate the houses, like having ramps, making them accessible, making your door widths, because a lot of like home builders will scrimp and scrounge on making your opening smaller, making your staircases smaller. But in case of like a life and death situation, it would matter for somebody who needed assistance to go through that. So at least keeping certain basic premise of accessibility and disability in mind would really help, so that people are not compromised later, and then you don't feel bad we didn't do it. also like doorways, escape routes, right? And also finishes, because right now it's becomes a fad thing, like when people want to specify materials for cladding, or they say, oh, I want it to look good. It could be a fire hazard, so really asking people to look at the classification, fire classification of the material that they're choosing when they're choosing it. So that would be an important criteria to look at. Similarly, electrical and allied installations, because almost 40% of fire accidents are electrical issues, and something that we kind of disregard. And it's worth really taking that time to tell people, take a breather, think about it. So these are the codes that they could be. Again, air conditioning, like India's looking to be, by 2022 we're looking at least 1/4 of the world's air conditioning could be from India. And that would, there would be, while it would increase global temperatures, really it would also cause, the power load on your houses would increase. So planning for that and making sure that people are ready for that, and their wiring is capable of handling that kind of pressure, right? So yeah, and that was it. And also then in sustainability, providing, suggesting and going beyond your comfort zone, and asking people to look at different alternatives. Or if a client comes and says, I want to try something unusual or something sustainable, it may not, you may have to put that little extra effort to look up the code and see whether it works or it doesn't. And uh, possibly the request is, why don't you take that time, because it might make for a better tomorrow, and have sustainability, and have a more sustainable environment for all of us. So that would be a way to look at technology options also. And again, disaster risk, and providing for that. So in conclusion, really, the NBC is an amazing resource. It's a great resource. And while it's a great resource, it's not available to the home builder. It's available to the civil engineer, the structural engineer, the architect, and the contractor. And so, but the people who influence the home builder are these people. And so let's have that available. So the invitation is to expand the scope of influence of a structural engineer to ensure that safety is an idea that can be truly, truly brought home, like brought home to each individual home builder. And this was just an aside as an architect, uh, that this is a picture from the illustrated codes by Francis Ching, which is a much nicer way to read a code actually than the way that we have the code, which is a little tedious to read and takes some effort. So I'm actually looking at anybody who's interested to take this on and say, okay, let's illustrate the code, let's make it readable for everyone, so that people who need to see it can see it. So on that note, I'd like to complete the first section of this presentation and move to the next one as to why we're discussing individual homes. And we're discussing individual homes because if you see the ads, people are building homes everywhere. Like it's about my perfect home, my beautiful home, build a home. And India is growing. That's the reason that we're building. And if you see, we're probably going to be the third largest construction market by 2025. And it's right now we're the fastest growing economy in the world, which is a great achievement. And when we're growing, we're developing. And as we're developing, people are building, and people are willing to build houses. And our housing needs are growing. The housing shortage, according to this 2014 Nielsen report, is, as shown, is about 21.7 million urban and 19.7 million rural housing shortages. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. And also, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana has figured out that that is where the lack is. So which is why there's a great thrust on building houses and having that available. So there's so much more opportunity to build than ever before. And what they discovered is, while all of us living in in the metros may not have the space to say we want to space, or even the time or the energy to say we want to build our own houses, in smaller towns and tier 2 and tier 3 cities, almost 89% of people believe in having a say in choosing their materials and designing the house the way they want it. They believe it's their investment, their time, and it's not just the investment of money. Like in metros, we will just say we will put the money down and we get a house. Here in other parts of India, people really invest themselves in that. And that's the opportunity for us as professionals to contribute. And the opportunities here, if you look at just the numbers, is that the urban housing opportunity is almost $40 billion projected costs estimated. And we will require architects and contractors and engineers for getting this done. And similarly, in the rural housing, according to the Ministry of Rural Development, they said approximately 43 million units shortage, which also includes the uninhabitable houses that people are living in. So they're living in conditions which are, you know, which should really not be lived in. And that's a gap that we're looking at. We can provide houses for all these people. And the government is working towards providing houses and housing opportunities for these people, and that's the opportunity for us as professionals. So, and what really surprised me is when I was looking at the figures is that in the monthly expenditure, the spending on housing comes second only to food expenses. So when we say roti, kapda, makan, it's actually roti, makan, and then maybe kapda. So that's what was surprising, and that's what's the opportunity here for us to really leverage and work on. So projections for the future that we're looking is individual home building is definitely a growing market, no doubt about it. And there's more awareness among home builders. So there's a chance of actually kind of influencing them to make better decisions, choose the right way, and choose better techniques. And while we have the wherewithal, we can actually have them make choices based on our interaction with them. And engineers are one of the key influencers, which is something that I think I've repeated from the beginning, and I'd like to reiterate, is because the engineers are the ones who are the most well versed and know the code best. So that's the best place to be in, that you know what safety entails, you know what it entails. So that's what the projection is. That so my question to everybody who's on this webinar is, so who are you influencing? Do you know who you're influencing? And the families that we're influencing are of all kinds. They're like, you know, single parents, like smaller families, larger families, rural, urban, extended families, joint families, all kinds. And each one of them has a very individual need. But if you look at it broadly, across India, what has shown up is that the home builder is mostly either a couple with children or an extended family. Now, if you look at that, it's almost 77% or 78% of the entire population. Now, when you look at couple with children and you look at extended family, we're talking about children and we're talking about senior citizens, both of whom need extra care and who are the compromised people, people who need to be taken care of. And that's where the safety comes in, providing houses that are safe, providing opportunities for safety for children and senior citizens. So when you look at the 77%, that's where that safety comes in. But when you ask a home builder what they want, they'll say Paka ghar, beautiful makan, the dream house, whatever I can afford, everything. But budget, in a budget, within a budget. And that's where people start allocating a budget. So where does the National Building Code come in? What did I think about that? And it comes in right here. When you're looking at a house and you're looking at the budget, there's a budget checklist that each home builder makes. And it typically consists of, okay, buying the land, whatever surveys, fees for different consultants, the construction cost, the interiors, the escalation jo hota hi hai, then all the consultants, your permissions, services, everything. So these are basic stuff that everybody takes into account, and the list goes on. But what's missing here is, where's the budget for safety? That brings me to the part 3. Where is the budget for safety? And that's what I'd like to leave people with, the question: have we budgeted for safety at all? So this is where the National Building Code comes into the picture. And just to take a little diversion, actually, it comes into this picture. And I'm sure everybody's wondering what this picture is, and I'd really like it if most of you all could send in what do you think this picture means with respect to my question, that this is where does the budget come in and where does the National Building Code come in. So I'd really like to know what you all are thinking, like really spread your imagination. If you all have already, if you already know what this image looks like, tell me you know it. But if you don't, I'd really like to see how creative you can be about it. It'd be very interesting. And I'm going to now reveal what it is. It's this, which is an elephant swallowed by a boa constrictor, which is a python. Now, I'm sure you all think either I have lost it completely or she's just digressing. But this is an analogy from a very favorite book of mine, which is called The Little Prince. And the line that goes with this says, what is essential is invisible to the eye. And that's my analogy for investment in the safety for individual home builders. So what I'm trying to say is that when you invest in safety, it's not seen, it's not visible. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, like what would a typical home builder choose to spend on? And if you've built your own home, I mean, assuming that you were not being the engineer on that project and you were just being a typical home builder, what would you choose to spend on? So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Would you spend on an earthquake resistant structure, or would you spend on imported marble for your living room? I think the answer is pretty clear. What most people would do, it's what's visible. Like खर्चा किया है, दिखना मांगता है, और अच्छा दिखता है, or it feels good. So people would go in for that. Similarly, what would you spend on? Would you spend on, like, a low smoke, BIS approved wiring, spend those few extra rupees on getting a licensed electrician or electrical contractor who knows their job and who won't just overload and say, acha chalo aur 2-3 point lagayenge aur kuch karenge, but somebody who really knows their job and is willing to give you a good job? Or would you say, let's go and invest in some imported chandeliers and some more air conditioners? What would the home builder choose automatically, naturally? If the answer happens to be option 2, which in most cases it will be, and there's nothing wrong with it, rest assured that the home builder has no idea what his choice has caused him to risk. They don't know. They don't know what it would cost. And what will it really cost them? An earthquake or an electrical fire could cost them their lifetime investment in their house. Or even worse, it could cost them their family. And that's priceless. And that is where I'd like us to step in as professionals. Really step in and make that difference. And this is just like a quick back of napkin calculations that I was looking at, that if you assume a 1500 square foot house, to make the construction earthquake resistance, there's an additional cost of 5 to 8% on the structural estimate, which zyada se zyada leke ballpark could be 1 lakh. Similarly, for the electrical safety, it would be 20% above normal wiring. And none of this will be visible. None of this will be seen. So if you tell the home builder, spend this thing, they'll say, but क्यों खर्चा करने का, नहीं होने वाला है. It's not going to be there. Similarly, for fire safety, buying fire extinguishers, how many of us would even do that? It costs you the cost of a microwave to get fire extinguishers for your house. So, is the life of a family member worth less than the 2 lakhs roughly that it would cost us to make our house a safer place, make our home a safer place? These are small decisions, but being informed can make the difference between life and death. And I'd like us, none of us, to be in that space of having to look back and be, have a regret about it. So why does it not get counted in? Because it's not mandatory. जब तक वो regulatory नहीं, जब तक वो हमको fine नहीं लगता है, we don't do it. We choose not to have it. It's only recommendatory. And this is where the worry is. We don't push the recommendation far enough. Like, look what happened to the new, what happened before and after the new motor vehicle law. Previously, no parking ka sign. Who cares? We're parking. Now, the moment there is a 10,000 rupee fine, there's not a car on that side of the road. The moment people realize the cost, they act wisely. And this is where the whole point of this webinar is, inviting people to be informed and make informed decisions. So by the way, I'm going to digress a little bit. Do you know which fire extinguisher to keep in your house or office? Or do you even have one? Does your family know how to manage such hazards? And I want each one of us on this webinar to think about it now. It's critical. And to reach out and tell people who have not heard of it. They may not be on this webinar, but this matters. If not, why have you not gotten to know so far? And if yes, you know, then how about getting other clients to know this? So for general reference, when I was going through, doing the research for this webinar, I found this website, which is the Directorate General Fire Services, Civil Defense and Home Guards website. And it's a really good, very simple, ready reckoner. So if you look at it, I've just put in the link there, and it mentions all these things. It says disaster preparedness for fire safety, natural disasters, man-made, and also for kids, because they're the ones who will be most compromised. And in fact, there was a case where this young girl saved lives because she had heard what was needed and wanted in case of a fire, to cover your mouth with a wet cloth and escape from there. So having our children be prepared for disaster is also a very important part. So we don't have to wait till it happens and then feel bad about it. This is a great website for us to look at and learn from it. So please do share this widely and make sure that people are in the know of this thing. So what can you do for the home builders? We can inform them. We can inform them that almost 11,500 accidents have occurred due to electrical accidents, and out of which 40% of loss of life has happened due to smoke, asphyxiation. And to tell people that that's what you need to know. Invest in better quality wiring. And when there is a fire, what to do, have a fire extinguisher ready, know what to do and to move out. All these three things should be preparedness that everybody should know. We should not wait for a loss of life close to us before we take this decision. Similarly, 80% of earthquake deaths are because building collapses. And India is a 65% seismically active zone, which most home builders will not know. Similarly, people have no clue whether their houses are in flood-prone areas or cyclone-prone areas. They just build. And this is what we can do, inform people about it. And since the National Building Code may not be mandatory for residential buildings, it's important. It's difficult to enforce safety, but you can tell people to choose. And invite them to choose wisely. And most of them will. And you can advise them to study the zone where their houses are going to be built. Plan for the future with safety in mind. And invest in the basics, well-designed foundations, electrical systems, planning for a future for themselves, for their children, and to be proactive in managing neighborhoods and environments, because your house is not a house by itself. It's in a neighborhood, it's in a town, it's in a city, and we're all connected. So really an invitation to go beyond just my own little house, but to reach further out, and to reach out and to inform other people about it. So that's what you can do as a professional. And for architects, because I think I'm primarily talking to engineers, like really have, I think rather than be on two different sides of the table, we're on the same side. We're standing for, building houses for people, making systems for them. And why don't we work together in saying, look for, like hazards that are inherent in the choice of materials and, techniques, look, and, sorry, I went back, didn't I? Also request a reading of the NBCs. We don't, as architects, I don't think we read the NBC as often as we should really be looking. And like actually for the engineers who are working with the architects, invite them to look at those clauses and be part of it. And also point out, what, we're working together. So if there's been an oversight in the process of design, point it out, because together we make India a better place. We make better homes. We make better lives. So, and choose to be a partner, like really choose to be a partner in creating amazing design for the IHB, and convince them to spend on what may seem to be boring safety items, but which will make a big difference when the push comes to shove then. And for local bodies, I think when you work, when civil engineers work with local bodies, corporators, on like larger projects, larger outreach projects, and really ask them to study the NBC and stick as close as you can, like stick to your ground when it comes to specifying things that are close to the NBC, rather than wait for it for people to say nahi abhi ye nahi karna hai. Like keep it as close to the parameters so that we're not that far off. There will be cuts, people will say no, we don't have the budget for it, and you might have to deviate a little bit, but try to keep as close, so we're maintaining the integrity of building as far as possible, and integrity of our profession. And also inform concerned people, like be courageous and inform concerned people if these cost cutting may be life threatening in an emergency. So really like look for having that uh, available to people, and be proactive in managing building teams. Like step out of your comfort zone maybe, and reach out there, and and raise your voice, rather than just अच्छा मैंने certify कर दिया हो गया, और मैंने बोल दिया हो गया. Like really make your voice heard. I think for far too long architects have been heard maybe, and not so much engineers, and let's have everybody be heard together. So as I come to the end of my presentation, I'd like to ask, what is it that you choose to create? The code can be a choice, like you can choose opportunities to design for excellence, or we can choose to have houses that collapse at the drop of an earthquake, where we have like charred homes because people didn't take their fire safety regulation, or we just get inundated and washed away and we have to rebuild from scratch all over again. What do you choose? So I'd like to conclude with addressing the elephant within once again. How do you choose to take it forward? Do you choose to let this go as business as usual and say, nahi pata, it's just one shape? Or do you say, let's do something different? Let's work together in a partnership and create a new future. And I'd really invite people to send feedback. Let's work this such that we are making a difference to the home builders across India, and really make their lives and their homes and their investments worth every penny of it. Thank you. If there are any questions, can you all please send them in? I'm sorry, I'm just going to.
go to the previous slide. Window खोल दो.
Sorry, I'm just going to take a little while we figure out where the questions are. Yes, the National Building Code is available for download. There are PDF downloads that are available. Once we download it, of course, it's so in fact, that's what I did. The thing is, opening up a book every single time is difficult, and it's also prohibitively expensive. It's almost 13,000 rupees. So if you're part of a college or an institution having that, or part of a group of engineers, yes, having a hard copy is always better because you can bookmark it and keep it. But otherwise, a soft copy is available, which you can bookmark and use as a PDF bookmark. So I think that was one of the questions. How many hours to study this topic? I actually wanted to put this dialogue in from the movie Dawn, which is NBC को study करना, पूरा study करना and completely study करना मुश्किल नहीं नामुमकिन है. It's a huge document and it's comprehensive. But we can start by doing little bits, picking up bits and parts, and simplifying, highlighting. That's what I've been doing as well, highlighting portions that matter, so that I can keep going back to those things and looking at it and learning constantly. Hmm?
Yeah,
This one. What is that tension zone on the site? I'm sorry, I don't know which slide you're talking about, but I'm assuming you're talking about the seismic zones.
Yes.
Whoever has asked the question about okay, how can the NBC be user friendly? I think that's something that we can work together to actually take references from across the world and also look at Francis Ching's book of illustrated codes, where to a great extent these drawings have been like the codes have been simplified in terms of a drawing, in terms of a graphic, and so they're so much easier to read. Like we've never really worked at making codes easier, and the opportunity is for us to have students of civil engineering, have architects also. And as an educator, I'm actually looking at seeing whether we can have students take this on, and maybe section by section taking it on and codifying it or making it graphic so it's easy to make it a reckoner. So yes, definitely we can work on having something like that. Why we don't have a regulatory body is that's really a question that I think, because across India there is so many variants that if we decided to have a regulatory body, we may not be able to build. It has to be on a case to case basis. Like if I'm looking at an LIG or a low income group housing, if I kept all the regulatory things as mandatory, they may not be able to build. So, and all the specifications for, maybe suppose we said earthquake resistance, may not be required for a small enough house. Like if I'm looking at like a 300 square foot house, if I had to go by the measures for earthquake resistance, maybe the cost of that house, the cost of the structural design would go up way above the cost of the house itself. And it would not be a buildable option. So given the fact that we have economic disparity, we have geographic disparity, it may be difficult to make it mandatory, while it would be great to do that. But till we all reach a level of, like, because we're such a diverse country and we have such diverse economic ranges, it may be difficult to bring it to a strict regulatory body. Also, it we're a work in progress. We're a nation in progress, like is happening with our motor vehicle laws. I mean, for years we've tried to say, follow the rules, and then we need a regulation, even if it's rolled back, to be able to start enforcing people following rules. So yes, why do we why don't we have it? We have to start with it. Somewhere we have to start with it. Yes, the NBC code is available freely. It's available online if you just Google it. Um, Audio was not working.
So,
Which is the one section that is more interesting to study. It actually depends on your uh, zone of interest. As an architect, I found the sustainability zone and the development control regulations for far more interesting, because the calculations were a little difficult for me to go through. But the broad outlines at every level, the introductions to each section, are very helpful in finding out, getting a gist of what the idea is for each section, and it's quite easy to read. This atlas is something that I found. The atlas is a vulnerability atlas, which has been published by the government of India. And so actually, I think we have so many resources that are available to us, which we never even know of. And the vulnerability atlas is one of them. And in fact, it says that it's also good enough for uh, the layperson to look at and understand and make decisions based on it. So there are maps for each thing, so they can find out which district they're based in and understand what risks they're building for. So but nobody knows about it until you look inside it. So yeah, so this is, you can Google it online, the Vulnerability Atlas 2019, and you will find it online, and it's very easily negotiable. I think that's it. See, maintenance is part of the management, project management, but not so much. It hasn't been taken that much into account, but it is there. There is a segment uh, for management of maintenance. But as a nation, we don't really take too much. Like we don't fix anything till it's broken, or we just try to keep doing, tweaking it. So maintenance is not like, has not got the kind of importance that it does. Like across the world, we have audits for buildings regularly to ensure that they are safe, audits for safety. We haven't got to that stage yet, but it would be a great idea to now begin that process somewhere, or to have people audited, like even at the cost of a little bit of money, like especially gated communities. I mean, begin with people who can afford it and then percolate down so it becomes a culture, such that people are auditing and maintaining safety. Also, as the number of appliances goes up, just just noticing that, like when we start overloading our plug points itself is uh, something that we should be self-regulating. So that it's something has to start as a self-regulatory measure, and then maybe going take that forward. What's the easiest way of knowing NBC codes basic is actually going through the soft copy and looking at the first sections of each uh, part, because that's the simplest. Before the terminology, it will give you a little brief about what that is. So reading the introduction and then going through the first sections of each chapter would be pretty helpful in giving you an idea. I'm not sure whether it has a rehabilitation clause. I haven't gone that far in detail, like I said, uh, about rehabilitation. And if the town planning acts like MRTP include NBC in law, it will become compulsory. Yes, it will. But I think given the variance in the housing, we'll have to kind of we'll have to set a level at which this will become mandatory and below which it will have to be recommendatory. So it will have to be a case-to-case basis, given that we have such a large disparity in building typologies and economic disparity also. I think my email ID has been shared, but I'm not sure where it is been shared. I can, if you send me an email, whoever wants the references that I looked at and websites, I can send them to you. I think my email ID is on the presentation, or rather it was on the presentation, but I can give it to you now. Can I just say it out? Yeah, my email ID is mythili.ks, that's mythili dot ks at gmail.com. So do send me a mail and I will get back to you with all the references that I have and whatever information I can give you. And if anybody would like to start up a partnership to start illustrating the code and making it more easily available, that would be great, because really it would be a big service to everyone across India. Yeah, that's it. Can this building be designed 20 years prior, be modified? It can be retrofitted. Like a structural consultant would definitely be able to tell you how you can retrofit certain measures to mitigate the damage. It may not be able to completely take care of it, because obviously there is a certain amount of obsolescence and certain amount of wear and tear, and circumstances may have changed. But for sure, there would be measures to be able to ensure that there is a certain amount of safety and security, at least till one escapes, or at least till one is to be kept protected for a period of time. So for sure, there are systems that can be worked out. Exactly. I mean, somebody who's mentioned Vastu Shastra, like the thing is, Vastu Shastra at one level also is very practically grounded. So, so the invitation is actually, if as a structural engineer or an architect, you are invited to comment on Vastu, I'd invite you to say, while Vastu is relevant, it also be great to say, how about looking also like Vastu being the basis of safety and workability? How about also looking at the practical aspects of workability and bringing safety in through that? So yes, people are more willing to spend on Vastu than they would be on safety. But if you brought them at par, if you brought them at level and said, if this cost you a life, what would you do? I think people would be willing to kind of put a little bit of money at least by into safety for sure. Can we get information about if there are any settlements in the foundation? Well, obviously the building is going to start telling you. You're going to have your cracks showing up, and there would be uneven settlements. Your cracks would start showing up, and you would know. And you would also get information from knowing the soil conditions, if not on your own site but in your neighboring sites. If you did notice sinkholes opening up, or if you noticed uneven settlement, or you noticed unusual soil patterns, that would give you an indication that there is something happening in and around your area, which you could then investigate. So you may not be able to investigate exactly on your foundation, but for sure, uh, in by an estimated guess or like informed decision, you would know.
Last one question.
Okay, last one question.
And,
Huh? Okay, you can write. I think any other questions you can write in to me, and we should be able to get back to you. I think my email ID was given, isn't it?
show the last slide. Show the last slide.
Sorry, this one.
Go down.
I can't see it though. Sorry. Okay, I'm just going to give my email ID on. I think it was there in the last slide. I'm just going to bring it up again. I'm sorry, I just shut it in a bit of a hurry. Yeah. Okay, so that's my email ID. And thank you everyone for listening in and participating. Thank you.